Hello, and we are so happy to be here for another fabulous Facebook Friday. I'm Jackie Jones.
I'm Connor Wigington.
And we are so excited today because we're talking about DUIs for the holidays and how
appropriate I can get you on my naughty list, but here's the thing. I don't want you on my naughty list, and in order to not get on my naughty list, don't get a DUI.
Well, driving under the influence, we're going to talk about that because it's something that happens every holiday season.
So often. And everything gets racked up in the papers, which I'm sure everybody reads. DUI here, DUI there.
You do not want to be on the cover of the paper in a bad DUI scenario this Christmas.
No, and what's so scary about it is it's so easy to accidentally get one. Really, just one more drink will put you over the edge.
So I guess we're staying here all day because today is the office holiday party and we intend to drink.
Yes, we do.
But we don't intend to drive. Right, we don't intend to drive after we've been drinking. We're just going to eat a lot more food.
Yep.
Personally, because I'm paranoid about getting arrested and being on the cover of the paper, I stop my drinking hours before I leave, and then I continue to stuff my face.
Hours, plural. Please note how that's plural.
Hours. And then I just stuff my face again and again and again to soak up the liquor.
And water is your best friend.
Because, science. Science.
Science and law go hand in hand.
I mean, scientists.
Clearly.
I'm political scientist.
I was just going to say that, but you stole it. Great mind thinks alike. There we go.
So, what do we want you to know? Obviously, driving under influence is a very, very important law throughout the country. We have DUI or DWI, as they're called in some place laws. They're important because so many people get killed or severely injured each year by drunk drivers.
Exactly.
We don't know the number because, as usual, we have done absolutely no research.
None.
Zero research. I barely made it in here before the Christmas party.
Yeah, and Christmas is right around the corner. We have families. We gotta buy them presents. I mean, come on.
And we haven't. I ordered Connor's presents before I bought stuff for my kids.
I didn't even know this. I didn't know I was getting a present till just now.
You knew you were getting a present.
Did I?
You did. You just didn't know what it was. And you still... I should open... here, Connor, open it on...
A Facebook Live
present. Facebook Live present unwrapping.
I love surprises.
So, no, later at the party. But why is this really important? So, several years ago, we changed our DUI law, and it went from a 0.1 to a 0.08, which is a lower amount of alcohol you have to have in your system in order to be found guilty of driving under influence.
And 0.08, that's really buzz driving.
Yeah. So not falling down stumbling, but buzz. People think,
You're feeling good.
Right. But it makes your reactions just a little bit slower.
Just a little bit slower. And what's so concerning is most people don't know it because they're feeling good. And based upon your intoxication level, you think you're in control based upon how you feel. But that's really not the case.
Now, not for us to make the case for our lawmakers, but while we're talking about it, there are some other things. There are 3 tiers in Pennsylvania, for instance, how we do this. There's the lowest tier, general impairment. You do not have to be 0.08 to still be found guilty of a general impairment. Do you know that?
You don't. You just have to be pulled over. The officer assesses you. Based upon that assessment, the officer can ask you to step outside to perform what's called a field sobriety test, which ranges. It could be anything, reciting the alphabet, walking. But if the officer deems, and keep in mind, this is what's important, the officer has a lot of discretion in this case. The officer deems you are unable to drive an automobile safely within the Commonwealth, you're going in the back of a police car for a DUI.
Now let's think about this, Connor. There are some of these field sobriety tests that I cannot do, even sober.
No. One of them is standing on one leg,
Can't do
hopping,
it. Can't do
putting your index finger on your nose, hopping on one leg.
Can
anyone do that?
Not while I'm hopping, because I'm not a hopper.
You would really have to do leg day in order to do that successfully.
I don't do leg day because I only pretend to work out.
Leg day is awful.
What I do is I put on my workout clothes early on a Saturday morning, okay, when I've run out of things that are clean and folded, and then I go about my day as if I were on my way to the gym.
I mean, really, Jackie, the only motivation to do leg day is on the off chance that this ever happens to anyone, be able to do the one leg hop field sobriety test. That's why you should do leg day.
I've
ladies
lost
and
about
gentlemen.
20 pounds, so I feel like I'm crushing it with
Yeah?
that leg day.
Absolutely. We've all lost weight
She
here at
totally-
Jones and
right, she
Associates
totally
on a
should have
strict
this-
regiment diet.
Should show you how these pants look. I mean, I'm just saying. But so we have people who now are maybe not fully drunk, but maybe just buzzed in their mind. Buzzed is like, that's like what people who are drunk but not drunky drunk call themselves.
Exactly.
And I made up my own version. Drunky drunk is my version of a word of people who were like exceptionally drunk, and they realize it.
It's not when you're drunky drunk, but it's when you go to maybe an office party and you're on your second or third glass of wine and you're starting to feel
And you
good.
start dancing with your
You start
coworker
dancing to Mariah
inappropriately.
Carey, and you're
All
like,
I want
yeah.
for Christmas.
That's when the radar goes
Dave
off
is
in your
saying
head.
we learned it in gym class in 19... Oh, wait, I'm not going to say what year it was, Dave, because then I will have to acknowledge that we actually were in gym class and still in high school at that time, which makes me older than, my face makes me out to be. My face totally puts me in my 30s.
Oh,
and so,
shucks.
Dave, I'm going to have to pretend that I was not in high school with you in the 90s.
Oh my goodness. I love it.
But we did. We learned all that. And they used to tell us, and remember they, Dave, because you're writing on the screen, they used to tell us about how many number of drinks, and it was based on like male and female, and what your weight was, and the bigger you were, the more number of drinks you might be able to take before you could hit the limit. But back then, the limit was much higher. It was a 0.1. And now it's 0.08.
You're just going off of that, Jackie. My parents telling me, and they come from a very different generation. They were in their 20s in the 1980s. DUI law was so different where if you were pulled over, the officer would even sometimes follow you home.
Just to make sure you
just
got
to
there.
make sure that you got there, but there
Right.
were really no consequences.
Not happening today.
No, not at all. And, the point that you brought up is weight and tolerance do play some type of role, but what's important here is there's so much gray area where literally sips could put you over the legal limit.
Well, let's talk about legal limits, because even though we do no research, we hear things.
We do hear things. KYW is an encyclopedia
News
of
Radio.
quick 1060. Anyway, Utah. Let's talk about Utah really
Talk
quickly.
about it.
Mitt Romney's new state.
His right. His
Mitt
new
Romney's
state.
new state.
I'm going to move to a state where they're looking for someone who fits my demographics to run for Congress, too.
Good for you, Mitt. Good for you. More power, right?
More power to you.
But they recently decreased the legal limit from 0.08 to 0.05, which is, that's like pretty low.
Well, I mean, it is Utah.
It is Utah.
And people already make fun of them and say things like they have, multiple wives allowed. So they don't want anyone to get drunk and accidentally marry another person.
Yep. Really really, they have their priorities there.
Yeah.
Real priorities.
So imagine that. I mean, 0.5 might just be a glass of wine for someone my height.
Yeah, really,
I look
really
tall
could
here,
be.
but I'm not.
But really, though,
Straight.
that's how much it really takes. Just don't flirt with danger. Uber's really your best friend.
Hey, we're not promoting Uber. It could be Lyft. It could be Auntie who wants to come
It
get
could
you.
be mainline
Uber
taxi.
writes no checks here.
Uber writes no checks here. Mainline taxi, Rosemont cab, just to name a few. But really, though,
Chester City Cab. I represented them
Chester
before.
City cab.
Yeah.
There we go. Another wonderful company.
I was the one who helped them get approved with the PUC to be an official cab company.
Ooh, look at
years
that.
I did a lot of
Yeah.
stuff years ago.
Years ago.
So now what we're saying is, and this is not just about us telling you don't be drinking and driving, because we want to give you information that can actually help you. So what happens if you get pulled over by the police and they say, I want you to perform field sobriety tests? Do you perform the test?
It's probably better too, because they could put a lot of restrictions for a refusal. They give you your O'Connell warnings.
Ooh, now he's using all these legalese words and law stuff. But not only that, we all agree you should actually take the field sobriety test, basically, right? Now, here's the part that's interesting. Pennsylvania law has a statute that basically says if you refuse, when I said there are like kind of 3 different tiers to this, the first tier is general impairment, then there's a higher rate of alcohol, but the highest rate is if you have drugs in your system, illegal drugs. If you refuse to give up blood or you detest it when they ask, or if you have over like a 0.16 or whatever.
0.16. 0.16 or above is the higher tier. You have
Right.
a middle tier, which is a 0.1 to 0.15, and then the lowest tier is 0.08 to 0.1.
Which also includes the general impairment we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
So, Connor, now what if someone, at this point, first, we've already given you our advice, which is go ahead and submit to the field sobriety test. Now, what if the cop says, I want you to go to the hospital with me so we can take blood work and see, what tier you fall into?
I would probably do that.
Well, probably. Connor, there's a reason you're saying probably instead of definitely, isn't there?
Yes.
What's the reason?
Well, there's a lot of factors that go into play. First, if an officer is going to bring you to a hospital, they have 2 hours from the time that they pulled you over. Secondly, it depends whether or not, doesn't urine and blood come into play, what they can extract you and what becomes intrusive, or is that just too...
What they do is they take blood tests if you go to the hospital, generally. It's not the breathalyzer. The breathalyzer they'll take at their station, but they will take blood generally if they'll take you to the hospital. But here's the part that Connor has not gotten to that I'm very anxious to get to. It was very clear for a number of years after the law first started that if you were if you were any of those from 0.8 up, right? You go in, do the blood test. Those were the numbers that were used to determine which tier you fell into. But if you refused, if you were considered a refusal, not only would you be charged with the highest rate, which is to say, so with that impacts punishment too, because the punishments are different too. Not only would you be charged with the highest rate of alcohol, it was automatic. And they would send a form, I think it was a DL-38 we called it in Pennsylvania, they'd send a form directly to PennDOT, which is our Department of Transportation, and they would automatically suspend your license for refusal. And there was no getting around that.
No.
There was no, I didn't refuse, he didn't tell me to do this. Once they deemed it a refusal, you were really in territory where your license was suspended. Then came that case that everyone talks about.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's some question as to what constitutes a refusal, whether or not you can still be found guilty of refusal under certain circumstances. And so it's difficult to advise clients on whether they should participate or not participate in having their blood drawn, for instance.
Yeah. It's a lot of gray area. Let's just go back. A lot of people ask this question when an officer pulls you over and the officer asks if you have been drinking. Is it okay to say no?
How about none your business? None ya?
Yeah, I mean,
none ya?
Are there any...
So 12-year-old, I know.
But still, though, are there any legal implications for telling an officer, no, I haven't been drinking?
Well, here's the thing that is the legal implication in my mind. There is a right to not incriminate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are being interrogated by an officer, like we always tell me, you have the right to remain silent. So to me, my bigger concern is, if you have been drinking, do you have a duty to tell the officer that you've been drinking?
Yeah.
And I would tell clients, absolutely not. You do not have the right to, you don't have to incriminate yourself, because maybe you can pass the field sobriety test. Maybe you are capable of walking the lines and doing the hop and all that kind of stuff. In which case, the officer does not have the right to then say, well, since you said you had a drink, I'm going to make you go to the hospital and take this blood test anyway. So for me, the more interesting legal question, or the one that I would actually tell my clients to think about, is you have the right to say nothing. And I would encourage you to say nothing.
Which is important. Which is what a lot of people really don't know. Should I not? No, you don't have to say anything.
Now, here's the other part that is much more important to hear from your lawyers. We are not naive. We understand that in the field things happen a lot differently than they're supposed to under the law. We understand that there are situations where these police say, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, I'm throwing you in jail, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, or the other. So we're not going to tell you, you must follow it this way. You can do what makes you feel comfortable in that situation. However, if, for instance, you have drugs in your system, I don't know that there is a benefit to you for submitting to a blood test.
Yeah, there's just...
You're getting the highest rate anyway. The only benefit may be that you don't get a refusal, which may mean that you don't get as long of a license suspension. But if you're convicted, which you will be because there's going to be drugs in your system, you're going to have a suspension probably anyway.
Yeah, now... The only loophole around that, and Jackie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have scheduled substances, meaning there are certain medications
Right.
that you are prescribed, but the government still ranks them as a schedule. For example, benzos are Schedule 4s, ADHD medications are Schedule 2s. Now, if you don't have a prescription to those kinds of drugs, then they're considered an illegal substance that could be found in your system.
Well, yeah. There's two things, though, and this is what the two things are.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, one, in some cases it doesn't matter because once you have substances in your system, certain ones, you're automatically going to be convicted. But here's the thing. There are certain substances where you may not be convicted of having illicit or illegal drugs. They may be perfectly legal for you, but you're not supposed to drive with them.
That's the thing.
So you may be like, I remember I had really severe tooth pain and they gave me like an oxycodone or something, which, by the way, stop doing that. Thank God I'm not a heroin addict. Give people something that's not going to lead them down the road to opioid addiction.
Tylenol.
I had Tylenol 3 too, and I was so terrified that I was going to become an addict that I would go between the Oxy and the Tylenol, and I'd wait, and I was like, okay, it's 4 hours in between. I have to wait at least 4 hours and 10 minutes this time, or I have to wait 4 hours and 5 minutes because I was so afraid that I was going to become addicted, and I was constantly timing myself because the pain was severe, and I didn't know how addiction formed. And since I do have some addictive personalities and I have people in my family who suffer from addiction, because I didn't know enough about how addiction formed, I actually used to time myself and try this exercise in willpower, even though I was in severe pain, and it was awful. Because I wasn't sure if that was phantom pain associated with me becoming an addict. Apparently it's not.
But it's still really scary.
But I was very scared, and I was very prepared because I thought this is how all of my clients who end up on heroin, this is how they start. So I was very concerned. But I know that I could not drive with that. Even with the prescription, I knew I couldn't drive. And I remember one time my whole head hurt. I felt like I could not, the aching. They had taken a tooth. I was getting an implant, which means something screwed up into your face. And I remember thinking, I cannot drive. Even if they stopped me for any reason, like I have a DUI, and
and you had a prescription for it.
I had a prescription, and I remember walking, thinking, I was like, I just have to make it. I just have to make it here. And I think I had to get the kids daycare money or something that day, and I was like, okay, I didn't have to pick them up, but I'd do something, and I was just like, I could just make it here. I can make it through. But we get confused, and we think because it's prescribed that we can automatically take whatever we want. If it impairs you to the point where you can't drive safely in the streets of the Commonwealth, then it actually is not good, even with a prescription.
Okay, that is definitely very interesting to know.
Right.
Because there are so many things, even ADHD drugs, Adderall, Ritalin, these are basically amphetamine drugs.
And they're everyday drugs, too.
They're everyday drugs.
They're something that we see a lot of.
Yeah, and they are stimulants, but they also have side effects, which a lot of people don't really think about because they're supposed to help you concentrate, but still.
Now, also remember, do not come to us after a DUI arrest and say, I refuse to cooperate and I want this all thrown out. That's less likely to happen. If you were like, I wasn't drunk, well, if you're not drunk and the test shows you're not drunk, I have a better argument for you. I can say, listen, he says my guy was unsafe. However, his blood alcohol level is 0.07. So as a general de facto number, he did not meet the requirements. So, hey, everyone in Adrian's office, we don't want you to leave, but thanks. So you really want to be careful about refusing to provide evidence that could be in our favor. But like I said, again, if you're shooting, if you're doing drugs, perhaps you don't want them to know what drugs are in your system.
Yeah, you just, no.
You don't, right?
Especially if there are drugs in your system, just don't say anything.
Be careful. So if you have any other questions for us about this or anything else, go ahead and put them in the comment section right now. We'd love to answer your questions because our office Christmas party starts in about 4 minutes.
Boom. And on that note, a Merry Christmas to all for those who celebrate, because we'll be having a Merry Christmas, right?
I plan to have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. So, guys, Connor says our end of the year, next week is our end of the year Facebook Friday. And we're going to talk about end of the year, end of life, meaning let's plan for your eventual death. So we're going to talk wills and trusts and estates and what that means for families. And what happens when someone leaves this earth and doesn't leave good information behind for their family about what happens. These stories are not fun, but they are going to be fun when you hear them from Facebook Friday.
Tune in.
Tune in. So again, as usual, we would like for you to like our page, like our YouTube channel as well, to subscribe, to send us messages, and if you have anything you want us to talk about, let us know in the comments, and we'll try to get to it as soon as possible.
That sounds great.
Does sound great. So for this special, a very special episode of
Facebook Fridays.
Facebook Friday.
Christmas edition.
It's the most wonderful time of the year. I'm Jackie Jones.
I'm Connor Wigington.
And thank you, and have a great holiday.
See everybody.
See ya.